Well, hi, Lucy.
Hi, Wendy.
So nice to meet you, and congratulations on this incredible film, on your incredible performance. This movie was 7 years in the making. What was it about? When did you hear first about the story, and what was it about the story that made you want to tell it to the world through the movie?
I did not hear about the story until it was presented to me. And then when I found out that it was based on a true story, it really broke my heart, reading it and then finding that out and understanding that this is something that could have been avoided. I think there was a great deal of interruption, not just with the language, but with an emotional value that was not communicated. And I think it's an important story for our community and for all communities to understand that it's a universal story that everyone is struggling with, especially people that are marginalized.
Yeah, absolutely. As someone who lives in the SGV, this hit close to home when I read about it. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And I also noticed how if it seemed like quickly people didn't want to talk about it because there is that stigma around the mental health and mental illness and everything between. So, um, your portrayal of Irene was really, I can't even put into words, but can you talk about digging into not just the emotional side of things, but also her physicality? Because while she was trying to keep everything afloat, she was also sick, but had to be strong for her son.
I think the frailty of her body was I guess, the scaffolding of that was really the will for her to live, to help her son and what she thought was helping him. And I believe that the courage that she had to go on and even do the things that she did was because of the love that she had for her son. And that is what, we really want people to take away from this is the love story between the two of them and how much she was willing to sacrifice because she really didn't understand the dynamic of what could have been.
It really struck a chord with me watching Irene go through everything because I also come from, immigrant parents and I know how much my mom sacrificed to do everything for me to have this life here in the States. In your experience and your researching and your process of creating this, not creating, but performing this character, did you ever pull from your own life experience, kind of watching your parents, what they did for you?
Absolutely. That is exactly where I came from to bring the heritage and the culture from before me to this character and to really, I guess, reflect on all of the women and the aunties and the my parents especially and the struggle that they had without all of the other things that, Irene had to deal with. And then on top of that, layer it with illness and, also a diagnosis for her son that she did not understand and that other people would then deem as, sounding like a foreigner or, having that stigma attached to what it means to even take medication or see a therapist. So for me, it really was a layered, complex dynamic that she had to deal with and had to live with. And it just, I wanted to bring as much authenticity to that as possible by, I guess, immersing myself in the language and the way that she would have spoken in, in America where she was as well. How that course of, I guess, translation would create this chasm between the person receiving it and for her to try to express herself in the best way that she could, even though it was not her native tongue.
And I think you, for lack of a better phrase, you nailed it. You've spent 7 years working on this film, researching, and what did you do during production to protect your own mental health?
Well, it actually was an kind of a conversation starter because people would share their own stories of their families or their loved ones or people that they knew that had gone through this and that were continuing to go through it. So the topic itself and the script really created a very safe environment for people to share.
That's incredible. Well, congratulations on the film. It was really such an incredible performance to watch. It's probably one of my favorite performances that you've done, and it's an honor to speak with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Congratulations on this film and congratulations on such an incredible performance. I'd love to hear about how you first heard of the story. Did it come through first through the audition and that's how you found out about the story? Or did you already like knew about it reading in the papers?
Yeah, so I actually had heard about the story. I didn't know all the details around it. But I had learned about this story because I knew people from Rosemead from the area, and so I had heard like a little bit, a little blurb or something about what happened. But obviously, I didn't have a complete understanding. It wasn't until I got this audition where I really looked into it, and it's really tragic because I think this story is something that really needs to be out there. People need to know and understand it. Um, and I just feel like it kind of got pushed under and forgot about, which is, it's unfortunate because I think that's a part of the culture of shame and culture of stigma that so many Asian Americans have around mental health. They want to ignore stories like these because it doesn't reflect positively, and that's a problem for people who don't understand mental health, because tragedies like these can be avoided if we just educated ourselves and learn more about them.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer and very similar to you. I'm in the SGV, so when I read about the story, it hit a little bit closer to home too. And then I noticed it was very quickly like not talked about
Mhm.
as much, kind of like what you talk about. It's a little bit like, how do you say it? Like in the best, like in Mandarin, like Diulian a
Yeah,
little
deal.
bit. Yeah. So your performance, like I said, it was really incredible, very emotional to watch. Can you talk about your process of playing your character Joe, who is suffering through these schizophrenia episodes? But in the beginning of the film, we see him masking it a lot in school, and I felt like you really struck the perfect balance of, portraying that and not going overboard. Can you just talk about your process of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, schizophrenia is something that manifests differently in every person. But for Joe, I think it was something that he really tried to hide at first. Like you said, he masked a lot of the emotions. In the movie, there's moments where he's like, no, I'm okay, like nothing happened. And that's a part of that is just the unfortunate stigmas around it. People, especially people within the Asian American or marginalized communities, the immigrant communities, they're not willing to talk about things like these. They're not willing to get help, even though they need it. And it's not until it gets worse and worse and builds up to the point where they can't control it when other people start knowing about it and trying to help them. But by that point, a lot of times it's too late. So in this role, I really that was something that I had to be aware of, and something that I really had to think about when I was playing Joe, because it's not just about understanding, how to say the line, how to hit the beats, how to, play the emotion. It's also understanding who these people are and what it means to have schizophrenia and what it means to live in that world, because it is something that is so multifaceted and something you have to think about and be aware of and show compassion to.
And as this story centers around mental health, mental illness, during production, what was something that you did to protect your mental health?
Well, actually, a big part of it was the production team itself. I think the biggest way that I was able to feel normal and feel okay through all of this was through the community around me, through Eric, our director, through Lucy, through our producers, everyone, they cared about each other, they cared about me. And so when I was playing these roles and it was too much or it was difficult, or you know days where I would wake up and I wouldn't feel normal, they took their time to help me. They took their time to talk to me and make sure. I remember there were days when I would call Eric, in the morning, and I would ask him about, like the scenes and the roles, and he would take his time to just ease my mind, and that is so important because you need community, you need support, not just as an actor, but also just as a person, every day, we need community, we need support because it's people like that help you be okay and help you overcome challenges and thoughts that you may have. It's how I was able to learn and how I was able to grow and just feel and get through this story, get through this character on set.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for all your incredible answers. Congratulations on the film.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I love to hear about, I mean, first of all, what a heartbreaking story. And it hits a little bit close to home for me also because I also live in the SGV.
Oh, mhm.
So yeah, when I heard the story, I was like, oh my gosh, how did this story come about for you? Did you read it in the paper when they published it, or did the script come first?
I'd read a lot of the headlines, but really I didn't read Frank Cheung's LA Times article that the script is inspired by until the producer Minette Louis sent it to me. I've built a career as a cinematographer, and we had worked on several films together, me and Minette, and talked about working on other projects together. And so luckily she thought of me, when they were going out looking for directors, and I just really connected with both the story and the script. I could really see my family, inside that story, and I could recognize sort of the dynamics that were portrayed in the script. And I felt like it was something I could tell truthfully and honestly. So I took the leap and decided to direct it. And luckily, they said
Yeah.
yes. Decided I could direct it, and then they said yes.
With your background as a cinematographer, can you talk about directing Lucy and Lawrence through all these very emotional scenes and also the schizophrenic episodes?
Yeah, absolutely. As a cinematographer, I'm always, the approach is always sort of from the character's perspective, and what their subtext is and what they're experiencing, like how they experience this room or talking to this person. So for me, that was my approach to working with Lucy and Lawrence was like how to make these things as real as possible, and especially in terms of like Lawrence's performance, we did a lot of research. We spoke to psychotherapists. We watched, there's YouTube videos that people post of themselves going through psychotic episodes to sort of demystify what it is for people. And we worked on a lot of rehearsals to like figure out what that would look like. And I uh, really wanted to make it sort of real in terms of Lawrence's experience of it too, and to give that truthfulness to the screen. And so one thing that we did is we put an earwig in his ear during certain takes where he was having a psychotic episode, which is sort of like this invisible little flesh-colored speaker. And in prep, me and the sound guy, Dennis Rinaldi, had we had edited together like these tracks. Sometimes it'd be whispering, sometimes it'd be experimental jazz. Depending on the mood of the scenes, like I had charted out the scenes and sort of what intensity and what his behavior would be like. And so we would play that during the scene, during takes, like when it starts to come on, to give him a physical reaction to something, and like it's all internal and it's all something, it wasn't part of like the any part of the soundscape of the final film, but it just gave him something physical to react to. Like he's trying to have a conversation with someone, but he's hearing these other things and trying to, hold on to his attention to these various things. And so that was one way that I tried to make it as real and lived in as possible for the actors.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you for giving us a sneak behind
Yeah,
a sneak peek behind the curtains. And my final question for you, this movie obviously touches on a very tragic story, and I hope the audience is, opens up the conversation about like the stigma that's around mental health, specifically around the Asian community. A lot of times we don't want to talk about it.
yeah,
It's like, oh, Tendolium, I don't want to talk about
yeah,
it.
yeah.
So what do you hope the audience take away from Rosemead?
No, it's absolutely that. It's like I hope it sparks conversations. I hope it opens up dialogue. Even what's been amazing is in our screenings, we've had people share, stories about people they know struggling with mental health and how they feel seen, either caring for a family member or seeing people care for their family members. And so it's opening up that space for people to talk and share. And, I hope it continues.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really I am glad a movie like this exists and will be out in the theaters for people to watch. And thank you also for highlighting the locations in SGV.
Yes,
I
of
noticed the
course.
99 Ranch.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Thank you for putting that. Do I understand it was mostly exterior that you shot in SGV, but everything else was
Yeah,
in New
yeah.
York?
We shot the bulk of it
Wow.
in New York in February and winter. So we had to be very strategic. That's where my background as a DP helped because I had to be very strategic about what we could show and where we could see windows and what was outside those windows and then how that would cut against all the stuff we ended up shooting in California. So it was tricky.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you achieved it. It was so well
Thank you.
done. Thank you so much, Eric, and congratulations again on the movie.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.